At Christmas, my son-in-law called me a stupid old man, mocking my knowledge of history with loud laughter. The room fell silent when one of the guests, his eyes wide, called me professor and shook my hand. My son-in-law's smug smile disappeared and his world fell apart. Before we continue, please subscribe to the channel and write in the comments what time it is where you are now. Listen, old man. I know for certain Gettysburg was in '64. Trevor's voice cut through the warmth of my library like a blade through silk. I set my coffee mug down with deliberate care, the ceramic clicking against the mahogany side table. My leather armchair creaked as I straightened. 40 years of academic composure, holding firm despite the tremor in my chest. Actually, Trevor, it was July 1st through 3rd, 1863. The words came out measured, professorial, calm. Trevor's face flushed red above his expensive wool sweater. He slammed his palm against my mantelpiece, making the family photos jump. Enough. You're just an old fool who confuses facts. The fire crackled in the sudden silence. Emily shifted on the sofa between us, her hands twisting in her lap. Trevor, please. I've been studying this for 40 years, I said quietly, gripping my mug handle. The porcelain felt fragile like everything else in this moment. Yeah. Trevor wheeled around, his designer shoes squeaking on my hardwood floor. Well, maybe it's time you stopped. That documentary I watched clearly said 64. You're losing it, Martin. Emily stood abruptly. That's enough. Her voice carried the sharp edge I remembered from her teenage years. Dad knows what he's talking about. Oh, great. Trevor threw his hands up. Now you're taking sides against your own husband. I'm not taking sides. I'm stating facts. Emily moved toward the coat closet, her movements quick and angry. Dad taught Civil War history for decades. Trevor's laugh held no humor. Taught. Past tense, Emily. Past tense for a reason. The words hit me like physical blows. I watched my son-in-law grab his black coat from the closet, his movements sharp with righteous indignation. Emily followed, her face pale but determined. Trevor, we're leaving, she announced, not meeting my eyes. Gladly. He shrugged into his coat with aggressive efficiency. I don't need to sit here and listen to confused ramblings from someone who doesn't know basic history. Emily finally looked at me. Her green eyes, my late wife's eyes, held apology and frustration in equal measure. Dad, it's fine, sweetheart. The lie came easily. A lifetime of protecting her kicking in. Drive safely. Trevor was already at the front door, his hand on the brass knob. Come on, Em. Let's go somewhere with people who live in reality. Emily hesitated for one heartbeat, then followed him out. The door closed with a soft click that seemed to echo through my suddenly empty house. I remained in my chair, listening to Trevor's BMW engine roar to life in my driveway. Through the window, I watched their headlights sweep across my snow-dusted lawn as they backed out. The red tail lights disappeared down Maple Street, leaving me alone with the dying fire and the word fool still ringing in my ears. Standing slowly, my knees protesting the movement, I walked to the window. The street looked peaceful under the December snow, other houses glowing with warm yellow light, normal families having normal Sunday dinners. I pressed my palm against the cold glass and watched until their taillights vanished completely into the Portland night. The front door closed with a finality that seemed to settle into my bones. I stood there for a moment, my hand still on the brass knob, listening to the silence that filled my house like water rushing into a broken ship. Fool, the word echoed in my mind, bouncing off the walls of my consciousness. 40 years of teaching, and this boy tells me I don't know basic facts. I walked slowly back to my library, past the family photos that had witnessed our confrontation. Emily's wedding pictures smiled at me from the mantelpiece, her radiant face next to Trevor's confident grin. How different that grin had looked tonight, twisted with contempt and certainty. My extensive library walls stretched before me, hundreds of volumes arranged with the precision of decades. I knew exactly where to find what I needed. My fingers traced along the worn spines until they found the familiar burgundy leather. Encyclopedia of American History, Volume 7. The book fell open in my hands like an old friend. I'd referenced these pages countless times, guiding young minds through the complexities of America's bloodiest conflict. The Gettysburg entry appeared under my fingertips without effort. The Battle of Gettysburg, I read aloud to my empty library, July 1st through 3rd, 1863. I set the book on my reading table and reached for my notepad, a habit from decades of lecture preparation. My fountain pen scratched across the paper. Gettysburg, July 43, 1863. Union victory. Turning point of Civil War. The words stared back at me, neat and precise. I knew them by heart, had recited them to thousands of students over 4 decades of teaching. Each fact was carved into my memory, like names on a monument. I pulled down another volume, then another. The Civil War Encyclopedia, Battles and Leaders, Military History of the United States. Every single source confirmed what I knew to be true. The smell of old books surrounded me. Leather bindings, aged paper, the faint mustiness of accumulated knowledge. This library represented my life's work, my passion, my expertise. These books had been my companions through retirement, my solace after Margaret's death, my connection to the world of ideas that had always sustained me. 4 decades of teaching Civil War history, of guiding young minds through the complexities of America's bloodiest conflict, and my own son-in-law dismissed me as a confused old man. I looked up at my diplomas hanging on the far wall. Bachelor's degree from Oregon State, Master's from University of Washington, PhD from Stanford, 40 years at Portland Community College, 3 published papers on Civil War tactics, students who still sent me Christmas cards, thanking me for inspiring their love of history. All of it meaningless to Trevor, apparently. I glanced at the family photo on my desk. Emily at her high school graduation, proud in her cap and gown. She'd always been brilliant, curious, asking questions that challenged me to think deeper. When had she stopped defending intellectual rigor? When had she chosen peace over truth? The encyclopedia still lay open before me. I traced the entry with my finger, each word a small vindication. But vindication for whom? The empty house offered no audience for my rightness. Closing the book gently, I looked toward the family photo again. Emily's young face gazed back at me, full of promise and possibility. That girl would have corrected Trevor immediately, would have stood up for facts over feelings. What had happened to her? I placed the encyclopedia back in its precise spot on the shelf. The question hung in the air like smoke from the dying fire, unanswered and troubling. 5 days until Christmas. 5 days to decide what kind of man I wanted to be. The week moved slowly. I tended my winter garden, read extensively, and replayed that evening countless times. Each morning brought the same routine: coffee, newspaper, the quiet rhythm of a retired man's life. But underneath the normally, something had shifted. The word fool had burrowed deep, creating an ache that wouldn't fade. Friday morning arrived gray and cold. I stood at my kitchen window, watching snow dust the bare branches of my oak tree, when the phone rang. Dad. Emily's voice carried that forced cheerfulness I'd learned to recognize over the years, the tone she used when trying to smooth over difficulties. Hello, sweetheart. I set down my coffee mug and gave her my full attention. I wanted to call about Christmas. She paused, and I could hear her choosing words carefully. Will you come to dinner with us? We're having a few people over. Trevor's parents, some neighbors, a couple of his colleagues from the firm. The invitation surprised me. After Sunday's confrontation, I'd assumed Christmas would be a small, awkward affair. Of course. Does Trevor mind? Another pause. Everything will be fine, Dad. I promise. I walked to the kitchen window, phone pressed to my ear, and looked out at my snow-covered garden. The careful neutrality in Emily's voice told me everything. Trevor didn't know about this invitation. Or if he did, he wasn't happy about it. What time should I arrive? Around 6. It's just family and friends. Nothing fancy. Her relief was audible now that I'd accepted. I'm making that crown roast you love. Sounds wonderful. I reached for the calendar on my refrigerator, marking December 25th with my pen. The date looked stark against the mostly empty month. Should I bring anything? Just yourself, Dad. That's enough. As I listened to my daughter's careful invitation, I realized this Christmas gathering might provide the perfect opportunity to address the lingering tension that had settled between us like winter frost. The mention of colleagues sparked something in my memory. Trevor worked at Morrison and Associates, a prestigious consulting firm. Interesting. Emily, I said gently. About Sunday. It's forgotten, Dad. Ancient history. The words came too quickly. Too bright. I'll see you Christmas Day. Okay. Ancient history, I repeated after she hung up. The phrase lingered in my mind as I returned to my coffee and newspaper. Ancient history. Exactly what Trevor claimed I knew nothing about. I folded the paper to the local news section, scanning the familiar layout: obituaries, community events, business announcements. My eyes stopped on a small item. Morrison Associates celebrates successful year. The article mentioned the firm's growth, their expanding client base, their reputation for excellence. Trevor's workplace. Trevor's colleagues would be at Christmas dinner. I set the paper aside and looked at my calendar again. December 25th, circled in blue ink. 5 days to prepare. 5 days to think about what kind of Christmas gift a father might give his son-in-law. The morning light shifted through my window, casting long shadows across the kitchen floor. Outside, the snow continued to fall, covering everything in pristine white. Fresh starts, clean slates. I smiled for the first time since Sunday. The weekend passed quietly. I read, tended my garden, and found myself thinking about Christmas dinner more than usual. By Tuesday morning, Christmas Eve had arrived with that peculiar weight that important days carry. Today felt different. I stood at my bedroom window, watching snow drift past the bare oak branches, and made my decision. If I was going to face Trevor's continued dismissal, I would do it properly. The navy suit hanging in my closet, the one I'd worn to Stockholm when they awarded the Nobel Prize in History to Professor Anderson, seemed appropriate for the occasion. Dressing had always been a ritual for me. 40 years of lectures had taught me that appearance mattered, that respect often began with how you presented yourself. I trimmed my beard carefully, polished my black leather shoes until they gleamed, and adjusted my tie with the precision of someone preparing for an important presentation. The kitchen table became my staging area. Brown paper spread across the surface, gold ribbon curled beside scissors, and Emily's gift waited to be wrapped. I'd chosen carefully a biography of Eleanor Roosevelt that she'd mentioned wanting months ago. She probably thought I'd forgotten, but professors never forget a student's interests. The wine had been more challenging.